Hello, I'm Quentin, and at the end of February 2025, I set off in my campervan on a trip with no fixed plan, but it ended up being mostly an exploration of northeast England and southwest Scotland. In fact, quite a few of the Scottish bits are actually south of many of the English bits. Anyway, do come along with me and my spaniel, and let's see where we ended up. Right, well, after a seriously scrummy breakfast up at the restaurant up there, that was really good, we are going to head over to the island, and we have glorious sunny weather, so I think it should be a good day. Right, let's get going. Normally in the past, when I've been filming in the van, I've always used my trusty old GoPro Max, which is a 360 camera, which has the great advantage that you can decide after filming in post whether you wanted to be pointing at me or pointing out of the window, and you've seen some of this already. However, there's a problem, and that is that it films in 4K or 5K for the entire 360, and so the resolution you get for any particular segment of the image is noticeably smaller. And this was fine in the past when I was filming everything in 1080 or 720 resolution, but now, compared to this Osmo Pocket 3, which is what I'm normally using at the moment, you do notice the difference in resolution when you switch between the two. So I'm doing an experiment here where I'm mounting the camera, the Osmo this time, on the windscreen, and we'll see how it does at being my driving camera. It's getting used for everything now, which means I'm going to have to watch the battery as well carefully. So here, I think this is much nicer weather than we had last time we were here, actually. Here is the causeway. Now, basically, you can come across here for about, I think it's about 4 or 5 hours, roughly 2 to 3 hours either side of low tide. But I was reading that apparently they do have to rescue 1 or 2 vehicles a year who try to make it and don't as the water is coming in. And part of the problem is that mostly you can predict this based on the tides, but of course if there are strong winds, big waves, and of course indeed you've got spring tides and neap tides, and the amount of time you have either side of each of these will vary dramatically. There's some lovely wading birds. I've just seen a curlew down there. Let's see if I can show you a little more of the view out this way as we go along. And there are spots here, not sure whether they're meant to be passing places or whether they are meant to be for parking and enjoying the view. But they would serve well as both. when we come back tonight, I probably should stop and do this, because when we come back tonight it's going to be dark. We'll be driving across here with our headlights on, so making the most of the view as we go across now. All of this area is normally underwater at high tide, and will be later today. And Google Maps is slightly confused. It's showing me driving through the water. I guess that's the safest bet, to warn people of this. Now, rather than going straight into the village, I'm going to turn off. I'm guessing this may be the turn for a little car park here. Now, I did read that this was a very poorly maintained road. And this little car park is pleasingly called the Snook. So we're parked just down there, and you can see the north shore of the island there. And that house over there, you may possibly recognise if you ever watched the detective series Vera, which is set in Northumbria, and that's the house where the detective Vera is supposed to have lived, which is a charming spot. But as several people have pointed out, if she needed to rush onto the mainland to solve a murder, she might have a problem if she had to wait 6 hours for the tide. Well, we had a lovely walk on the beach, very blowy, strong winds there, and we're now walking back towards the van in this lovely sort of scrubland, and 2 large herons just took off not very far in front of us, just over there. Sadly, of course, I failed to catch them on camera, but it was impressive nonetheless. This is a great place for bird life, and this is why I'm hesitant about letting Tilly roam too free here. Well, there you go. I'm not sure that Vera's house had solar panels on the roof in the TV series, but there you go. That's definitely it, the Snook. And it's an excellent TV series, by the way. Definitely recommended. And there's this tower over here, about which I gather relatively little is known. I'll go and see if I can read some more about it when we get back into the car. But what you may be able to hear here is we have some really quite strong winds. And just over the roof, you may be able to see the van in the car park about there. Somewhere over there is the campsite. Yes, I think it's there. That's where we stayed last night and we'll be staying tonight. What a lovely spot, and how amazing to get weather like this at the end of February, beginning of March. I mean, I'm actually warm despite really strong winds. The sea is a lovely blue colour, and just a few clouds going over. It's really very nice. Well, that was lovely, and actually, in weather like this, if we did nothing else but come over and have a picnic there, it's just a really pleasant climate out there at the moment. They're very windy. I was surprised my little drone was able to cope. It did give me high wind warnings. when I'm worried about that, I always try flying it upwind first to make sure that I can get it back to me at least. But it coped fairly well. No vehicles are normally allowed into the village beyond this point, so you turn into the car park here on the outskirts and find yourself a spot to park. Several of the cottages have these wonderful colours in their stone walls, and even the ones that don't are quite cute. So here we are in downtown Lindisfarne, where amongst other things you can buy mead. The St Aidan's Winery, home of Lindisfarne mead, it says over there. There's the old post office. This is Lindisfarne Priory. Over here is the parish church of St Mary. Now, there's been a religious community here since the early 7th century, when St Aidan and St Cuthbert founded a religious community. But this priory is more recent. It's post-conquest. I think it was 12th century, and the church here is, I think, 13th century. So I was reading about the difference between priories and abbeys, because I've been using the terms somewhat interchangeably, but this is technically a priory. The main difference is that a priory has a prior and an abbey has an abbot or abbess. But it's a little more complicated than that. Abbots are senior to priors, so you can think of an abbot as more like a bishop and a prior as more like a vicar or maybe a canon. But abbeys tended to have a prior as well, who looked after things, sort of manager. Some priories had abbots, but they weren't abbeys because the abbot wasn't technically a member of the religious community. And then you find that some houses, Cistercian houses for example, were all abbeys. So it's a little bit more complicated than simply you got an abbot or you got a prior. Now, that, in the distance there, you can probably see the castle. And we've been to the castle before, but I don't think we've been here to the priory. And this is rather a splendid ruin. Well, I've just had a very good crab sandwich at the Manor House Hotel here, made from the local crab. And I'm sitting outside enjoying the sunshine. It's just amazing. I have a view of the sea, I have a view of the castle, I have a view of the priory, and I have a pint of local beer. Life is good. Now, next to the War Memorial is this little squat tower called the Lookout, from which you can get a view over the island. Let's go and have a look at that. Well, this is worth climbing up the stairs. This used to be a Coast Guard's lookout, apparently. Over in the distance there, we can see the castle. It's not really that far, but I'm on a wide-angle lens. Over there, as I suspected, these are the Farne Islands. Over there's Bamburgh Castle, very splendid edifice with one of the worst modern art exhibitions I've ever seen when we were there last. So you see these two obelisk type things there. It says down below that those are used for navigation, so I assume those are leading lines or transits, which probably means that they will guide you. If you get them in line, they will guide you safely in from over here somewhere. That's my guess. Interesting. I must have a look on my navigational charts for that. And here you are. I took a look at this on my navigational charts a little bit later. So this is where we are in the video. So this is St Mary's Chapel, and indicates the restaurant there. That will be the hotel where I stopped. But that little white thing there is the lookout, and then there was a kind of marker with a triangle on top. I don't know if you noticed that was close to it. So that's there. And if you line up as you're coming in from the sea, if you want to go along this channel here, which avoids most of the really shallow bits, the white bits here are deep. You can do so by lining up that pointy tower thing with the belfry of St Mary's Church. So that gets you along this line. If you're coming in from further out here, you do so by lining up those two obelisk type things that we saw. So they are indeed navigational aids which bring you in, avoiding some of these shoals and so on here. And so in fact, if you're coming in from this direction, you could follow those two, and then once you're past the green buoy here, you could turn and follow those two. Now you can of course do it by GPS as well, but it's much more fun, or if your GPS isn't working or anything, it's much more fun to be able to do it by looking ahead of you at landmarks that you can actually see. If we come around a little bit, we're looking at the Cheviot Hills in the distance over there. This is St Cuthbert's Island down here. St Cuthbert actually lived there for a while before he moved to the Farne Islands, deciding presumably that living there wasn't remote enough. Well, I'm guessing this little boat may be parked here simply to be picturesque. It's certainly in a very good spot. So here is Lindisfarne Castle. It really is up on top of a rock, and I probably won't go in for two reasons. One is that I've been here before, and two, I think it's actually closed, but I can still walk around the outside before heading back into the village. Well, it's good to see EV charging points on Lindisfarne. That is excellent. Not many charging points that have a castle you can look at while you're charging, probably. In fact, this car park that's close to the centre of the village is for coaches, disabled people, and EVs only. So here you go, a little bonus you get if you come here electrically. Here we are back at the car park, the main car park, and it is, as expected, rather quiet here, with just two vans still in situ. Well, it's a great thing to come back to a vehicle where you have comfy chairs and a bed for Tilly, and even a bed for you. That is a very good end to a walk. We've been about, it must be 5 or 6 miles, I think, so quite a good stroll. Absolutely lovely. Couldn't have had better weather at this time of year. It was really great. And it is now very much high tide, or just coming up to high tide. So it's about 5 hours yet before we can leave the island. But that's just fine. We could even make some food if we wanted. But first of all, a cup of tea and a bit of a snooze, I think. Okay, Tilly, do you want to come in too? Well, I thought it'd be fun just to go and look at the road. And you didn't have to go far, really. There you go. We really are cut off. Where this grass and seaweed is, that's the high water mark. Welcome to Lindisfarne, says the sign. That says you beach your boat on the road, I imagine. The lady here says this is one of the highest tides, as you can tell by the fact that we are so close to the deposits and the seaweed. And just over there is the road we drove along earlier, which Google was showing as being underwater. And at this time of day, it was correct. There you go. Next modification to Google. Show the high and low water marks. Very nice. So we are definitely cut off. Right, back to the van before I get my feet wet. Well, I just thought we would come down again before the last light went from the sky. It was actually an amazing sunset, which I watched from the van, but it was quite cosy, so I didn't want to get out and move again. But this is still very beautiful. And you'll notice here that I'm just using the main mic of this camera and the wind has almost completely gone. It's very still, and you may get a little bit of wind noise, but not very much. You may be able to see there's a rather beautiful moon up there as well. So you'll see that the tide has gone out a little bit. There's a bit more road visible here. Not nearly enough to drive on yet. We've got a few more hours before that's the case. But slowly but surely we will stop being an island and be reconnected to the mainland. Now, I did read something in one article about how the modern causeway is at this end of the island, which makes me think that perhaps there was another causeway once over there. I'm guessing probably at the closer to the Priory. The camera's showing this up a bit more than we see in reality. It's almost dark here. And no one would guess from looking at this how warm and cosy it can be inside. If you get close enough, you may be able to hear the little hum of the heater, because in fact inside there, it's really getting quite chilly out here, but inside there it's 20 degrees. Well, we came back across the causeway, which I intended to film, and then about halfway across I realised I hadn't actually pressed the start button. However, we're now back at the campsite, and I did know that the gate was going to be shut, but they said I could open it when I got back. One thing I notice whenever I get outside on this trip is just how good the stars are, and I think here particularly it's a low light pollution area. I think they have fairly strict restrictions on how much light you can show at night. It was actually so dark it was quite hard reversing onto the concrete slab that was our pitch. I could just make it out in the glow of the reversing lights. But eventually, after a day cut off from the mainland on a wonderful island. We made it back to our pitch and went to bed.